Hello there. You're listening to Linda Pinizzato of the Condo Expert, and I've been covering an interesting topic. It's called Fintrac, Fintrac. Now, interesting. You look at different penalties that are out there for criminal activities and whatnot. And, I can even go one step further and think about, different legislations that are out there and the different provincial acts which cover different circumstances. Like, for instance, the Health and Safety Act, the Condominium Act, the Traffic Act. Now, mind you, those are provincial and Fintrac is federal. However, the question is that when our politicians are looking out for our best interest, whether it be at a provincial or a federal or a municipal level, I think that, when we have penalties of some sort that are involved because of non-compliance, it offers us a lot more protection than it would be if it's just a self-governed situation. Like, here's the rules, be good, make sure you follow them. And there's the door. So just do the best you can. And it's okay. We won't be coming after you, but these are the problems. Well, that's not really a good attitude to take at all. And as everyone knows, in my opinion, and as a matter of fact, in the opinion of the Condo Owners Association, we don't believe that the Condominium Act should be self-governed because it just opens itself up to too many problems of non-compliance and without any degree of penalties for persons that are involved in whether they be fraud, whether they're non-compliance of the Condominium Act, or whether or not they're through the property management of the Condominium Act or the condominium building. Anything that's relating to people's health and welfare and financial being, which is their values with their real estate investment. And it doesn't matter whether they're owner occupied or whether they're an in-country investor, out-of-country investor. But the interesting thing here is that, when I look at Fintrac, and Fintrac, because it was, put in front of the faces of the realtors, obviously it's something that forms part of the entire transaction of purchases. Well, why is it, then if you turn around, you take a look at the other picture and you think, okay, fine, just a minute here. You're buying a condominium and you need to get a status certificate and it shows you all the information of the building and so on. And you're depending on that information being correct to protect you. But what you don't have is you don't have any degree of insurance that the paperwork that's coming out there hasn't had some kind of activity that should not have happened because whatever is in those financial statements is what the board is reporting. However, there is no a direct compliance because of the self-governed way that a board can operate because the Condominium Act is self-governed. So where I'm coming from here is the paperwork that you're receiving on the status certificate. How do you know with the financial statements? Yes, granted, they were done and approved by an auditor. I get it. That's simple. But that's not the point of concern. That's what's being reported. The point of concern is that activity that's come together before the auditor statements or what's being reported to the auditor statements. Is what's being reported actually what's happening? And if it is, then why do we have so many condominium buildings out there that have ridiculously high maintenance fees, unusually high, undescribably high? I don't get it. The pieces don't fit. When you have small children, you're always, you go to Toys R Us and, what do you like to buy? Years ago, I bought that for my kids. It was fantastic. I buy a puzzle. And it's even, you can buy the wood puzzles and you have all the animals or the houses and all these different action figures and whatever. And these puzzles are pretty cool. and even down to the, the globe that you have, and you have the little items that, one's shaped in a circle and the other one is a square, and little blocks, and you can put them inside the little globe, and that, hand-eye coordination, and it is a puzzle, and you put the pieces all together, and when you put the pieces all together, voila, you have a completed puzzle by a 1.5, 2-year-old, correct? Okay, so let's go down to basics here. We have a huge puzzle here where, the safety and security of condominiums relates on the operations, the Condominium Act, the financials, the reserve funds, the operating budgets, the contracts that are going on to manage these $80 million buildings. And then we have the owners. So those are all the pieces of the puzzle. However, the main part of that whole puzzle is going to be on operations, governance, and accountability, and who makes the decisions. So who owns the puzzle? Well, the puzzle's owned almost, being, looking at this in a very simplistic way, is the board of directors, because they're the ones that are running the operations of the corporation. And they should be running it under the Condominium Act. So, today we're talking a lot about Fintrac. And interesting enough, I'm going to talk about the penalties that would be involved. But I am referring to the fact that the Condominium Act has no source of governing penalties whatsoever. And that is a problem. And that's a problem that the Condominium Owners Association has been constantly advocating. Premier Wynne, Minister Tracy McCharles at the Minister of Consumer Services, because unless we can have some kind of accountability, and yeah, you know what, unfortunately, fines and penalties and potential imprisonments and so on seem to force people a little bit more to do what they're supposed to be doing. Not suggesting that it should be that tough, but at least have something. But the tough criminal penalties that are involved in Fintrac are fantastic. So kudos to our federal government and Fintrac, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada, for getting that part right. I feel protected, and I'm sure you all do too. So here's the thing. Cases of noncompliance, law enforcement, extensive noncompliance, what kind of criminal penalties may be included? Well, failure to report suspicious transactions. Get this, up to 2 million and or 5 years of imprisonment. So there you go. You know something's going on and you're not reporting it. So look at that stiff fine. And that's to make sure that they receive the information so that then they can move forward and investigate it. Failure to report a large cash transaction or an electronic funds transfer, up to $500,000 for the first offense, $1 million for subsequent offenses. Failure to meet records keeping requirements, up to $500,000 and or 5 years imprisonment. Now, I'm going to stop on that one for really quickly, because records keeping requirements, that actually would go right back to real estate brokerages. Because, when the realtors are out there and we are completing this paperwork and we have to submit it, we have to submit a Fintrac form every time we have a transaction. Well, not only does the realtor have to keep all this information, but certainly the real estate office. And when a buyer submits a deposit on a purchase, that deposit is going into a trust account on behalf of the buyer, because the monies does not belong to the seller until the final transaction is closed. The monies also don't belong to the real estate office, because the real estate office is only the participating party in the transaction. So they have to arrange a trust account. And the deposits are going into the trust account. So there you go. So where are the deposits coming from? That's the question. And there's something called a proceeds of sale, Fintrac proceeds of sale. So not only does the information sheet of Fintrac have to be put together, but also the proceeds of sale. Now, what does that entail? That entails, say, for instance, myself. I've just done a transaction. My client, my buyer, has just handed me, a $20,000 deposit check, or, certified or bank draft. I would then take this to the listing company, submit it to them. They would provide me with a receipt. But not only would they give me a receipt, they would also give me a receipt with a copy of that bank draft or certified check. And on that, of course, it will give me the identification of who it was drawn on, whether it was CIBC or RBC, whether it was a bank draft versus being a certified check, the numbers, and so on. Now, once I have that, I then have to complete the proceeds of sale. And on that, it's going to identify the property, the buyer's name, where the bank draft or the certified check came from, what the amount was, the number of it, and so on, and what it was used for. And that is included with the entire package of an agreement of purchase and sale. So not only do we have the agreement, but then we also have the Fintrac requirements and, other information as well. Now let's go on with the criminal penalties. The next one, failure to provide assistance or provide information during compliance examination up to $500,000 and or 5 years imprisonment. Self-explanatory. There you go. And the last, disclosing the fact that a suspicious transaction report was made or disclosing the contents of such a report with the intent to prejudice a criminal investigation up to 2 years imprisonment. So, this is serious. And it has to be a serious. I mean, in today's society, it's not like it was back in, 1990s. I mean, we're in 2014. And there are major concerns about Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act. And our federal government has to stay on top of it. And we have to have ways that we can monitor it and for them to be able to have a reporting system and the ability so that later, if they do have a report given to them, they can then go out and investigate it appropriately. Now, there are reviews and appeals. So, if someone does not agree with a decision made by Fintrac, they can request a review of the file by the director of Fintrac. And there would be a certain amount of time in order for them to do that. And plus, they have the right to make representation to the director concerning an administrative monetary penalty. And they can also apply for the review made with respect to registrations of money services businesses. So, there is a review policy in place. And, and there has to be. Everybody does have their right to either arrange for representation or represent themselves and go into any type of court of appeal. But, the key thing that I want to talk about today is the fact of the necessity to have different types of finding processes and notice of violations and penalties if this type of thing is going on. Now, funny too is that, what I'm always surprised about, and I still haven't figured this one out because it doesn't make any degree of sense. If you're a condo owner, and there's a lot of condominium owners right now that they've purchased for investment. They haven't purchased for owner-occupied. Has anybody out there, have you ever run into a situation where you didn't use a realtor, or maybe even if you do use a realtor, and you've decided to advertise your property for rent, and you've gone on Kijiji or Craigslist or whatever, and you receive a telephone call from someone, and they come and they see your unit and they're all excited. It's great. It's perfect. Love the layout. Love the location. Fantastic. The value, the price is wonderful. But rather than just giving you the standard first and last month's rent, which across the board, I mean, that is the way it works. First and last month's rent. But man, I'll tell you, you better have those warning signals tapping out at you if it's not just first and last month. Because if they're willing to turn around and give you 4 months, 6 months, a year up front, you better ask a bunch of questions because there's something going on. The standard everyday person does not just throw out that kind of money to rent a property. The other problem too is that, with respect to the Landlord and Tenant Act, they question that kind of thing as well because it's not the norm. And it could also land you as an owner. You could land yourself into some serious issues depending on how you've gotten that agreement of lease written up. Because if you're requesting it, you run into a big problem. Now you're in noncompliance of the Landlord and Tenant Act. If they're offering it and you've accepted it, well, then the picture changes a little bit. But, at the same time, these are things, why go out of the norm? Definitely something to think about. You're listening to Linda Pinizzato of the Condo Expert. Hang tight, got tons of information.